Hey everyone, Ross Marchand here, Vice President of Policy for the Taxpayers Protection Alliance. And you may be wondering what is going on with Tax Day. Tax Day today is in July. And joining me to discuss this, all things trials and tribulations the taxpayers are going through, that's right, let me say it again, in July, is none other than TPA President David Williams. So David, first of all, again, third time's the charm. Tax Day in July. What is going on? And why did the IRS set this deadline? Is now the right time, in your opinion, to require that taxpayers file their taxes, or is it too early, too late? What do you think?
So a lot going on here. First of all, you're right. July 15th is the new tax day. We thought that April 15th was going to be tax day, but because of COVID-19, they had to delay that, and justifiably so. I mean, there's a lot of chaos in this country in April. So they probably did the right thing by delaying the deadline to file your taxes. So now, July 15th, people are having barbecues and picnics and thinking about their taxes, which is not, tradition in this country. Usually, obviously, April 15th. But listen, we still have a host of problems with the tax code, with spending. So even though tax day has been delayed, we still have the same problems. And I hope, Americans look at just what's happened the past 3 or 4 months and the massive amount of spending that's gone on, because there's obviously a direct connection between the spending and taxation, and especially if we have a new administration next year, what could it mean for tax increases? So strange times, Ross, to be in the middle of July and worrying about filing taxes.
Indeed, I would say Christmas in July, but it's kind of the opposite. But let's talk about some of the spending, right, that you mentioned. The deficit is approaching. I mean, the year is obviously, we still have many months to go before the end of the year, but already the deficit is approaching $4 trillion. That's trillion with a T. So how did such a massive bill accumulate, and what could Congress and the Trump administration do to get spending under control?
Yeah, so a lot of money has been spent this year, and you're right. We're going to see a deficit of $3 or $4 trillion. And what's crazy is that Congress now talks about bills, and they're talking about trillions. They're not talking about billions or hundreds of billions. They're talking about trillions, as if that's the new benchmark for this. And we saw a lot of spending for hospitals. During the COVID-19 pandemic, we saw a lot of money being spent to bail out companies, individuals, unemployment. And I guess you could blame part of the deficit on Kanye West and Robert De Niro,
Got
because they got
Yeezus
money.
going on, and
Yeah, because they got money through the Paycheck Protection Program. And I mean, obviously, a lot of other people did too. But when you have, billionaires, I think Kanye is a billionaire by now. Uh, Receiving
sounds right, yeah.
taxpayer money, it's obviously crazy, but I think people are really going to be focused this year on the spending, because there's been so much of it, and people are just trying to get through this pandemic.
Right. And in particular, the media has been talking nonstop in recent weeks about the defense bill. And you have the House and the Senate, and they're marking up and they're reviewing their own versions. But it is an inevitability year after year. TPA has been documenting billions of dollars per year in earmarks once the House and the Senate gets together and they try to reconcile their respective versions of the defense bill. So what's going on? Because I thought, last I heard, earmarks have been banned since 2011. So how on earth are they getting around this ban on earmarks?
Yeah, so you're right. So 2011, they banned earmarks. Well, that didn't stop them, and it hasn't stopped them over the years. And really, the last bill that has earmarks, because we go through this every year, we go through every appropriations bill, and the defense bill is the one where we see all these earmarks. And we're talking about everything from research and development, $100,000 or $200,000 for research and development, or literally billions of dollars for weapon systems like the F-35. And the reason they do this is because they can. And just to remind people, when we talk about these earmarks, these are things that the Pentagon did not request. These are items that are only added by a member of Congress or members of Congress, but this is spending that originates in Congress. The Pentagon has said no to these projects and these programs. In the case of the F-35, Congress is adding additional planes, and the F-35 is just historically bad problems with it. It's over budget, it's behind schedule, it's the usual sort of government program, but it's an expensive boondoggle, and we keep on funding this year in and year out. And the biggest problem with the earmarks is that when you have Congress making these decisions, you have 535 uh, secretaries of defense because they're saying this is where I want the money to go for the Defense Department. No, we have one Secretary of Defense who works with the services to determine what the needs are of this country. And I'm not saying the Pentagon is perfect by any stretch of the imagination when it comes to wasteful spending. They have a lot of reform to do, and that could be a whole different conversation. But Congress just steps in and says, okay, we don't care what the Pentagon wants. This is what we want. And that just obviously is chaos in the budgeting system. So that's why these are so bad, and because they're just not requested by the Pentagon, and it just breaks down the whole system of checks and balances.
Well, whether it's defense spending or let's say farm subsidies or what have you, it seems like a very familiar pattern because you have taxpayers sending their hard-earned dollars to Washington, D.C., and it's distributed and there's all sorts of shenanigans going on, but it's always very poorly targeted. So what can we do in the realm of tax reform and making sure that any, for example, coronavirus-related relief allows for more people to keep their hard-earned dollars instead of sending more and more tax payments to Washington, D.C.?
Well, that's the thing is that, first you have the problem of the government shutting down the economy. So, as we've discussed, this was a takings by the government saying that you can't operate your business. So there was a role for the government to compensate these people who lost their livelihoods. But what we need now are incentives for people to go back to work. And those are tax cuts, whether it's a payroll tax cut or other ways to do this, is to incentivize people to go back to work. Now that the country is reopening, we need to look at ways to get people back into the economy. And when you have state unemployment benefits at $400 per week, then you have an enhanced federal unemployment at $600 per week. We're talking about $1,000 a week. Now that's $52,000 a year, if my math is correct, and I'm pretty sure it is. I mean, that's more than the median income.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's crazy to think that the median income is now unemployment. And that's why certain members of Congress are trying to correct that and make sure. And it's important as we discuss this on tax day, because obviously this is a lot of money, but at the end of July, these benefits are going to run out. The enhanced federal benefits are going to run out, and Congress has to decide whether to extend them or not. And again, the Taxpayers Protection Alliance, we want incentives. We want tax cuts, payroll tax cut. That will, really increase economic activity and not just have people sit at home.
Well, I think that one thing you could continue to count on is spending shenanigans will continue unabated past tax day, going into taxes for years and years in advance. But one thing that's also for certain is the Taxpayers Protection Alliance will continue to try, I'm trying to be cautiously optimistic here, try and hopefully succeed in holding lawmakers and the Trump administration, maybe, I don't know, in the future, the Biden administration, accountable and make sure that taxpayers have as low and manageable of a bill as possible. And to follow our work, everyone should feel free to go on our website, protectingtaxpayers.org. Well, thank you, David, and we'll see what happens in terms of future spending and tax-related developments. Thanks.
Thanks, Ross.